The contradiction of a jealous God, divine hypocrisy or human projection. The Bible's portrayal of God as jealous creates an undeniable logical and ethical contradiction. On one hand, jealousy in humans is condemned as a sinful, destructive emotion. On the other hand, the same Bible unapologetically attributes this trait to God, framing it as a righteous aspect of his character. This glaring inconsistency does more than just raise eyebrows. It fundamentally undermines the moral coherence of the biblical narrative and the credibility of its divine protagonist. Jealousy in humans, a condemned sin. Let's start with the Bible's treatment of jealousy in humans. Scripture is unambiguous. Jealousy is bad. Galatians 5:19-21 lists jealousy alongside debauchery, rage, and envy as works of the flesh that disqualify one from inheriting God's kingdom. James 3:16 bluntly states that jealousy breeds disorder and every evil thing. The message is clear. Jealousy is a petty, selfish emotion, emblematic of humanity's flawed nature. It destroys relationships, sows discord, and embodies everything that God supposedly despises in his creation. Yet the same God who condemns human jealousy is quick to declare himself jealous. Cue Exodus 25. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. If jealousy is such a destructive force, what does it say about the morality of a being who proudly claims it? God's jealousy, a divine double standard. The Bible's attempt to justify God's jealousy as righteous creates an absurd double standard. God's jealousy is portrayed as a protective desire for loyalty, stemming from his love for humanity. But how is this different from the insecure, possessive jealousy condemned in humans? If jealousy is harmful when it manifests in human relationships, why does it suddenly become virtuous when applied to God's relationship with humanity? The answer seems simple. It doesn't. This is not moral consistency. It is blatant hypocrisy. The Bible essentially demands that humans adhere to a higher ethical standard than God himself. How can a supposedly perfect being exhibit traits that he himself forbids in his creation? Jealousy or insecurity. The flawed nature of a perfect God. God's jealousy raises another troubling question. Is this divine trait rooted in insecurity? If God is truly omnipotent, omniscient, and sovereign, why does he need humanity's unwavering worship? Why would an all-sufficient deity care if a mere mortal worships another god or none at all? Such behavior reeks of insecurity, not divine majesty. Moreover, this portrayal of jealousy suggests that the biblical God is more a projection of human emotions than a transcendent being. The jealous God of the Bible looks suspiciously like a reflection of the flawed men who wrote these texts, a petty ruler demanding fealty, obsessed with his own glory. The ethical dilemma of divine jealousy. God's jealousy also introduces a disturbing ethical problem: the use of coercion to enforce loyalty. In his jealousy, the biblical God punishes those who fail to worship him properly. Consider these examples. In Exodus 34:14, God's jealousy demands exclusive worship under threat of severe consequences. In Deuteronomy 6:15, his wrath burns against those who turn to other gods. This is not love, it's authoritarian control. God's demand for absolute devotion, coupled with his readiness to punish dissenters, mirrors the tactics of a tyrant rather than a benevolent creator. How can this be reconciled with the claim that God is just, loving, or merciful? The contradiction is impossible to ignore, a human-centered explanation. The most logical conclusion is that the concept of a jealous God is a human invention, reflecting the cultural and emotional biases of the people who created him. In a tribal society, where loyalty to one's group was paramount, a jealous deity made sense as a tool for social cohesion. Worshipping other gods was akin to treason, and the portrayal of a jealous god enforced conformity. But in a modern context, this anthropomorphic deity feels outdated, petty, and morally questionable. Why cling to the idea of a god who exhibits the same flawed emotions we are told to overcome? Isn't it time to ask if this jealous god is simply a relic of a bygone era, a projection of human insecurity rather than a true reflection of divine perfection? Conclusion: a jealous God, unworthy of worship. The Bible's depiction of God as jealous reveals a profound inconsistency that calls his moral character into question. If jealousy is sinful in humans, how can it be virtuous in God? This contradiction smacks of hypocrisy and diminishes the credibility of a supposedly perfect deity. Rather than elevating humanity, the jealous God drags divinity down to our level. If such a God exists, he seems less like an omnipotent creator and more like a petty ruler obsessed with his own ego. Perhaps it's time to reject the idea of a jealous God altogether. Question of the day: if jealousy is condemned as a sin for humans, but the biblical God proudly declares himself a jealous God, is this divine hypocrisy or an ethical loophole? Can a perfect being have the same flaws he condemns in his creation? Or does this contradiction expose a flaw in the Bible's portrayal of God? Moral double standards. If jealousy is a work of the flesh, Galatians 5:19-21, does this mean the biblical God is acting out of his own sinful nature? Or is he setting up a moral system he conveniently doesn't follow? Is this the ultimate do as I say, not as I do scenario? Why would an all-powerful biblical God need to stoop to an emotion like jealousy to maintain loyalty? Is the perfection of the biblical God a myth if he relies on human flaws to enforce devotion, insecurity, or sovereignty? Can a truly sovereign, all-sufficient biblical God feel threatened by humans worshipping other gods? If he's omnipotent, why does he need constant reassurance of his greatness through exclusive worship? Is this jealousy a sign of insecurity? If the biblical God is above human emotions, why is his jealousy so similar to the possessiveness seen in toxic relationships? Isn't this portrayal more of a projection of flawed human traits than divine perfection, authoritarian control, or love? The biblical God's jealousy doesn't stop at feelings. It demands punishment for worshipping other gods. Exodus 20 verse 5, Deuteronomy 6 verse 15. Is this divine love, or is it authoritarian control wrapped in religious language? If the biblical God is truly loving, why does he need loyalty enforced under threat of wrath? Does this make him more of a benevolent creator or a tyrant obsessed with his own glory, a relic of tribalism? Could the jealous biblical God be nothing more than a cultural relic of a time when loyalty to one's tribe and its deity was essential for survival? If so, does this invalidate the claim of divine universality? Is it time to admit that the idea of a jealous biblical God reflects human insecurities and societal structures rather than divine truth? The controversial challenge: if jealousy is sinful in humans, how can it be righteous in the biblical God? If the biblical God is jealous, does that make him a sinner by his own standards? If not, why should we trust a moral system with blatant double standards? React and respond. Is the jealous biblical God a moral contradiction, an invention of insecure men, or something deeper? If jealousy is a sin, and your biblical God is a jealous God. Does that make your God a sinner or a righteous God?